So today I want to talk about the 5 mistakes people make when getting into whiskey. So grab a dram, grab a seat, and let's... Welcome to First Fill, I'm Phil, and I'm going to fill you in about whiskey. So the first mistake people make is adding water, adding ice to their whiskey, but not really knowing how it affects the whiskey, how it changes the whiskey, how it changes the aromas of the whiskey, and just sort of putting it in because you just sort of think that's the thing you got to do. And I saw them do it on Mad Men, and it's pretty cool, and it's a pretty cool guy, and he's got a nice haircut, and I want to be a pretty cool guy as well, because just cool guy. And see, I'm in two camps about this. On one hand, I think, just drink whiskey how you want to drink it. It doesn't matter. It's your whiskey. You spend the money on it. Like, don't let anyone tell you what to do. On the other hand, I think the thing is, if you've got a $200 bottle, I think you should probably know what happens when you add ice to your whiskey before you just throw it in there. And again, I think adding ice can be really good. I have this tumbler glass. You can put these just big ice cubes in there. It's real open, and that's the good thing about tumblers, is you can add ice cubes really easy. And this is one of my favorite ones. It's the Liton. Like, this one's got like Grand Canyon on either side, and there's some that have mountains on it. And yeah, I just personally think that's pretty cool because I love mountains, as you can see, mountains. If you follow my photography account, Philip Gow, you can see I've taken a lot of photos of mountains. Here we are, we've got Matterhorn, the Lofoten Islands in Norway, Canada, and I think there's Pato Lake. I like mountains. Sort of the vibe of whiskey. Some mountains, some whiskey. I just think, it's a good match. It's a great match. Let's get some whiskey. So here we are, we have basic malt, the Glenlivet 12. The great thing I like about the Glenlivet 12 is I don't feel bad about putting this with ice or putting it on the Glencairn, because it's a reasonable price. The good thing about adding ice to this is it actually makes it more approachable. It makes it more, it kind of tames down the spirit a lot. It makes it easier to drink. And if that's what you want, to happen, great. Do it like that. And that's often how I do it in summer, or sometimes I'll get home from work and I just want to have a nice whiskey with ice. I'm not assessing the flavors too much. Great way to drink whiskey. Or if you want to mix it, you want to do an old fashioned, this is the one you want to use because you can put stuff in it and you can mix it up and it's all good. And the Glencairn is good. And any sort of nosing glass, anything that's got that tulip style, sherry glass, and the one I would say whiskey geeks to look out for, if you're a real whiskey geek, the 1920s blender's glass. And I had this at a tasting the other night with Eat Smoke Drink, and he's a big fan of it, and man, does that give you some power on the nose. And that's the thing about this glass, it adds the nose to the equation. You barely can smell anything. You basically smell like the water and a very, very subtle amount of whiskey. But even the whiskey's so diluted, it's gone. The alcohol's been completely tamed. Whereas with this, the nose is just huge. You're just getting a basket of fruit. Just those apples and pears and all these like great flavors. And it just adds a whole new element to the whiskey. Watch my video, how to drink whiskey, if you want to look more into, which glass you think is best. And I drink both. I'm not against any of them. It's all about just time and place, and that's what the mistake is. It's not realizing which glass you would use when, and that's just a principle. That's not a rule. That's the first whiskey mistake. And now whiskey mistake number 2. So the second biggest mistake people make about a whiskey is sticking with what they know. And this can actually be quite easy to do because whiskey is very, very complicated. There's so many different levels, countries, distilleries. You can be aged in different types of wood. There's different types of barley. And so what often people can do is they'll go along their whiskey journey and then they'll find a whiskey they really like and then they'll stop. They'll stop the journey. And then what will happen is, I know people who will just have a shelf of Macallan, or they'll just have a shelf of Lefroy, or they'll just have a shelf of Buffalo Trace. Or even the next level, people might have different whiskies on their shelf, but they'll all just be smoky whiskies, or they'll all just be sherried whiskies, or they'll all just be bourbon. And they won't try and go outside of that bubble and see what else is out there. And the thing is, I think exploring whiskey is actually one of the most fun parts about whiskey. You know, it's basically like Pokemon. It's not really about catching them all. It's about each journey. It's about each catch, each try. Finding out what all the different elements of this particular whiskey is and where it's from, what distillery, what's wood. It's about that exploration. It's about finding out more. But often we don't really know where to start with that. So what I recommend is, I've done 2 videos, the one called Whiskey Regions in Scotland. Maybe you just drink bourbon and maybe you should try Scotch. So maybe you should watch that video and find out which region in Scotch you want to explore. You know, find a few distilleries there and just try them one by one. You don't need to know everything straight away. Say you want to try whiskey from one of the islands, you know, start with Arran or start with Jura. Just explore it, try it, and then move on to the next one. Or maybe you're a Scotch person and all you drink is Scotch. Well, maybe you should just try a rye or try a bourbon, or maybe an international whiskey, like an Australian whiskey or an Indian whiskey. And the other thing you can do is, maybe you got mates into whiskey, share your drams, share your whiskey. It's like the end of this video, of every video I do. Share and enjoy. Share and enjoy with friends, with family, with whiskey clubs. And you know, someone recently sent me a bunch of drams. Drams, quite a few they haven't tried. Let me show you. So here's 2 drams that someone sent to me. Someone local, someone in the same city as me. And that's what you can do. Find a mate and share your whiskies. You know, you get a big 700ml bottle and you can just pour a dram for them, and that way you can talk about the whiskey, share your experience of the whiskey, and it just makes the whole experience more fun and more interesting. So here we've got the Paul John malt bottled at 46%. And this is really interesting because I haven't really had much Indian whiskey, and it's something that I personally want to explore at the moment. I want to try a bunch of Indian whiskeys and find out what's going on there, because I think some really interesting stuff is happening. So I'm really looking forward to trying that malt. And another whiskey I've been sent is the Douglas Lang Old Particular Single Cask Macduff 12, which is bottled at 48.4%. And this one's really interesting as well because it's from an independent bottler. And independent bottlers are really interesting because it's not directly from the distillery. What happens is the independent bottler buys a cask from the distillery and then they can bottle it at a strength they want. They can choose a cask they really like, that's really interesting, and especially a single cask, whereas most distilleries will kind of blend kind of the cask within the distillery. They can choose a single cask that tells you a lot about the story behind that single cask for the independent bottling. And so this is a really interesting part of whiskey that I'm wanting to get more into as well. I want to explore, you know, what are the different independent bottlings at the moment? And then how do those independent bottlers who rebottle whiskies from the distilleries compare to the original bottling from the distillery? And what's the difference there? So it's really interesting stuff. It's all about exploring, finding out more, and it just helps you enjoy it more. I'm just going to pour myself a dram. So let's talk about whiskey, you know. Kind of makes you want a whiskey. So yeah, on that Paul John you're getting, there's sort of like a zestiness from a lime and a lot of floral notes, but it's got this undertone of cereal as well. Really interesting. This is definitely something I want to try more of. And the other dram, Old Particular Macduff. So massively huge amount of chives, huge amount of sour cream and chives. You're also getting this a little subtle bit of banana skin in the background, like rotten banana, like ripe banana skin. Bit of onion, garlic. Very, very savory whiskey. This one, very savory. Like one of the most savory whiskies I've had. Really interesting. Really good they've been sent these malts to try. I recommend you share with your mates whiskies as well. So let's get on to the next whiskey mistake that people make. The third whiskey mistake that people make is equating value to the price. And the thing about it is, often with economics, The only reason the price could be high is because there's only a small amount of whiskies from that distillery or from that expression. And this is a big thing with closed distilleries in Scotland, like the Rosebank or the Port Ellen, where bottles can go for up to $2,000. But the thing is, there might only be 50 bottles of that particular expression, which is why it becomes so expensive and so wanted, as opposed to, say, a Springbank, which you can still buy today. You can buy a 12-year-old, you can buy it at the cask strength, and it's a fantastic malt. It doesn't mean the whiskey is going to taste better if it's more expensive. It often will just mean that it might not be as available. So unless you're into whiskey collecting or anything, sure, maybe that's when the value can be added. But if you're just into drinking whiskey, enjoying the tastes and the flavors and the smells, yeah, just don't think that the price of the whiskey means it's going to be a good tasting whiskey. They can be two very different things. And the next whiskey mistake is storing your whiskey in the sunlight or storing it somewhere where the temperature can change too much. And I went through this in a recent video about how to store your whiskey and about whether or not whiskey can go bad. And the answer is yeah, it can go bad. If you store your whiskey in the sunlight, it can change the chemical compounds. And if you store it somewhere where the temperature is going up and down, that can also change it too. And I won't go into too much more detail, I'll get you to watch that video, but basically try and store it somewhere consistent. Store it somewhere where it's a little bit darker in your house or there's no sunlight coming through, and somewhere where maybe it's not close to your heat pump, close to your heater, close to your fire, so that temperature of the whiskey is not going up and down all the time. Whereas somewhere where it's more consistent, and that way you're going to make sure your whiskey will last. So the next whiskey mistake actually kind of goes against a lot of the other things I've talked about, and that's just don't focus too much on other people's rules. You should drink whiskey the way you want to drink it, and this is something the Whiskey Tribe talks about all the time. Drink the whiskey you like and drink it the way you want to drink it. Because at the end of the day, it's your money and it's your whiskey and you do with what you want. These are a bunch of principles that you can choose to take it, you can leave it. As we grow in our whiskey knowledge and as you learn these things, it can be easy to kind of tell other people they're doing it wrong. And I would just say, share your knowledge gracefully. You don't want to put people who are just getting into whiskey off whiskey because, they could be a good whiskey pal later on where you can share your whiskeys. You can talk about tips, you can talk about what you do and stuff, but at the end of the day, everyone's got their own money and they can do with whiskey what they like. There are the top whiskey mistakes that I think people make when they're first getting into whiskey. So if you like the video, make sure you give it a like. It really helps the YouTube algorithm and it'll help this channel grow, reach more people, and it'll help me make more videos. These videos take a long time to make. I like to make my videos at pretty high quality, as you might see. It would really help me if you just take a little moment right now, give the video a like, but above all, make sure you share and enjoy. Beauty.